Hey everybody, welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast, presented by the Triple S League. Check us out on YouTube for game guides, reviews, comedy, music videos, cosplay videos, all kinds of fantastic gaming and wonderfully nerdy content. My name is Asheninity, and I'm here as always with Subsidian.
It is so hot right now.
What is?
Well, I mean, the weather primarily, but yeah,
Hey.
I guess you could say my mad pecs too, you know? No, I'm just kidding.
Every part of you is going mad slowly, so it's all right. We got some gaming news this week, as always, but there's something else in the news that's probably, it's been all over the place that needs to be talked about.
Hopefully you have seen it, and hopefully you have done something about it.
Absolutely. So net neutrality is in the news because there's some reviews going on right now. The FCC is considering rolling back its net neutrality regulations that are in place and have been in place since 2015, I believe.
They were updated in 2015, but they've more or less kind of always been there. There's always been kind of some fairly stringent rules about net neutrality, and there's been places in certain countries that have gone back on them. And for example, in China right now, you can't view, I think, anything that's streaming. So Facebook, YouTube, every streaming service in China has been not just shut down, but like people will go to jail if they try to stream. So that's not necessarily a net neutrality thing, but it's...
That's an all-out censorship thing. That's an all-out...
Yeah.
What...
But
sorry, streaming like
streaming in general, it's like it's a broadcaster that they can't control because all of the broadcasters, like all their TV stations, all their radio, is heavily monitored by
right, absolutely.
Party officials who make sure that people are not saying anything against the government or anything against the ruling party class. And
right.
So
is it just
nasty.
Live streaming or all streaming services, all like video streaming services?
Anything that's live streaming.
Okay.
Recorded stream, obviously like YouTube videos, a little bit different. Again, not super connected to net neutrality, but this is to showcase that there's countries and there are people, groups and political parties and business groups who will take advantage of rules that are less lax.
More lax, you mean?
They're more lax. They will take advantage of every inch they can possibly get, whether it's a big company like Comcast or if it's a political party that happens to have some pull in corporations and companies, or maybe it's a government.
Well, this is where it's getting scary. Just to be just so we're on the same page with our listeners here. So net neutrality, the concept behind it, is that internet service providers, so the companies that give you your internet access, they are not allowed to treat certain packets or units of data that are traveling through the internet. They're called packets. They're not allowed to treat one packet any differently from another packet. Yeah. That's net neutrality. So the service providers have to treat all packets equally. That's the premise behind net neutrality. And that is currently in place in law in the United States and in other places as well. There are some countries that don't have it. There's arguments on both sides of this, but and some argue that net neutrality regulations are preventing innovation in communication services, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how accurate that is. I'm skeptical.
It's complete bull.
Well, I was reading some arguments that these rules are preventing us from making from certain ways of monetizing our services, certain innovations that would help us bring in alternate sources of revenue. And I'm thinking, what exactly are those? Because that sounds very suspicious. It's like if we could have more control over manipulating data on the internet, we could make more money. By doing what exactly? Having people pay you so that their content is treated more preferably? That doesn't sound good at all. So
that's exactly it. So right now there's in a lot of places, it's not just in America, in a lot of places you only have like one or two providers in areas, and this does not allow for good competition. In our area, there's only two providers, and both of their prices are some of the highest in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we pay an enormous amount of money for very bad service, and we cannot go to anybody else. And so they don't really compete with each other. And so the trying to get, innovation and trying to get good stuff is very difficult to get it. And when you enter in, rules that allow them to essentially ignore net neutrality, it ends up getting worse and we've seen this very, very, we have seen cases of this where one company who owned, the biggest share of the network suddenly stopped allowing people to Google and go to websites of their competitions or people that they did not like.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a huge issue, but again, they haven't paid for it. They haven't paid a heavy price. And so this is really boils down to freedom of speech and freedom of information. And that's the biggest thing. Now, I understand that there's, that net neutrality does instigate some barriers, but these are essentially like speed bumps. This isn't a discussion of, how to let them create innovation. It's about them wanting to take to take more money for their services without necessarily creating innovation from our perspective, having had dealt with this in our general area and having, I do work and do a fair bit of work for companies that are involved in this field. And I see terrible corruption all the time. Mm-hmm. And it makes me not want to consult for these kinds of people. And I got to say that we point it out where we can, but as far as what's going on, and this is really, really, really right now, this is focused in the States. We should probably made that clear sooner.
That's the, yeah.
This is going on in the United States, but the United States is the leader of the pack, and what they often do affects a lot of other smaller countries. Right now, Germany and France are restricting what their citizens are able to get and look at. Recently in Hamburg, it's like, hey, you can't get data without, paying a lot of money, showing your passport, and then letting us scan your data. It's like, wait, what? Why do you need to know any of that stuff? What is this?
This is going down the road to dystopian stuff.
It really is. It really is.
We called our podcast Augmented Reality, which is, of course, overlaying a digital reality on top of physical reality, which for a long time, that was something that only existed in science fiction. But now, lo and behold, we have technology that can accomplish that. And
it's getting better all the time.
It does. It is, and it does. It just makes me think, how far off could we be from one of these sci-fi dystopias that we've been reading about and watching movies about for years? The technology exists to literally, monitor everybody on the planet, or at least monitor, your internet traffic and what you're talking about.
We know that this is what governments have been doing. In Canada, there was a huge Big Brother program. In America, of course, Snowden revealed there's a massive Big Brother, another huge program. It's been established in in China, for example. It's just like, duh, you assume you're being watched by a government agent 24/7. That's that. I have friends who've come out of China and said, yeah, it's a great country, but yeah, everything you do is being listened to by, somebody's listening to what you're saying, what you're doing, what you're looking at online, and that's not a good system.
Yeah. So what does this have to do with net neutrality? Well, concerns about net neutrality have less to do with innovation and technology advancements as they do with the manipulation of information, either for monetary gain or to fit some sort of agenda. And we live in an epoch of time where we're seeing this, and we know. I mean, it's basically known for a fact that a lot of the big players in the internet, so companies like YouTube, Google, Facebook, Twitter, all of those, we know that they manipulate data. We know that they manipulate what you see, and often it's under the guise of, steering you away from fake news or
YouTube, we love you, but your trending feed, That it's complete. It's completely made up.
We know it's complete horse shit.
It's.
We know that it's.
Now, YouTube. We understand. You want to make money. That's okay, but you should have two. You should have, back in the day when you couldn't get movies at the touch of a button on your computer, you had to go to this thing called a movie store. Or before that, you had to, get your adventures and information from these things called bookstores. And there was always like a manager's selection. Mm-hmm. That's not a bad thing. Yeah. It's not a bad thing to come out and say, this is our manager. This is what we personally, who work at this place, really want you to read and look at. And some of it they might be paying us for, but it's all good stuff. Once you know who we are, you can take that with a grain of salt or whatever. But a trending feed should actually represent videos that are actually trending.
Yeah, don't call it a trending feed. It's curated. Yeah. It's curated, and it's some of the most bizarre stuff winds up there, and then there's other videos that are doing way, way better on a given day that don't show up there. This has been documented many times. This is clearly what's happening.
Lots.
You're not fooling anyone. You're not fooling anyone. That's what I think they don't really understand, is they're not fooling anyone.
Yeah. And again, you don't have to. You don't have to. So it's just kind of unnecessary. So
anyway, so back to net neutrality. So there's a lot of doomsdaying that's going on, and people are saying, oh, could it really be that bad? Like, you have countries where you don't have net neutrality rules, and it's not that bad there. Well, just to give you an idea of why this is very, very important, we've got a list of net neutrality violations that have taken place, both under net neutrality rules and in the absence of them. This will give you an idea of the kinds of things that ISPs are capable of, that they're willing to do if they think it benefits them. And while we're going through this, I want you to keep in mind that we live in an age now where data is being manipulated for political reasons. So keep that in mind and let this scare you, please, because this is very important. This affects everybody who lives in the internet age and wants free access to information. It's not just about, I don't want my internet to get throttled down while I'm watching Netflix. It's about, I don't want to get some video I'm watching on YouTube throttled down because the ISP disagrees with what it's saying. And that could absolutely happen. So here we go. Going all the way back to 2005, in North Carolina, internet service provider Madison River Communications blocked Vonage, which is a voice over internet protocol service, which is basically it was like the earliest version of Skype, basically, like talking on the phone over the internet.
Yeah. This
ISP basically just up and blocked this product. It doesn't say here what their reason for that was, but...
Well, their reason for it was obvious, because they had phones that they sold. If it's anything like most of the companies out there, they sold internet packages. They also sold phone packages, and they realized, hey, people just buy an internet package and then completely not even use the phone package and pay, 5 to 10 cents a minute for phone calls. My God, this is ridiculous. So they immediately blocked people accessing that tool and that program so that they couldn't get access to a service that rendered one of their services inoperable.
So also in 2005, Comcast, which was the largest internet service provider at the time, began secretly blocking peer-to-peer technologies like BitTorrent and Nutella. Now, there's legal questions surrounding these BitTorrent streaming or
obviously
sharing type services, but the point is they began secretly, keyword secretly, blocking these things. So people were unable to connect. They didn't know why, and it's because the ISP was actually blocking it.
Mm-hmm.
In 2005, Canada's second largest telecommunications company, TELUS, began blocking access to a server that hosted a website supporting a labor strike against the company.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about things getting political? This action resulted in an additional 766 websites that were completely unrelated also being blocked. But yeah, so they had a personal interest or a business interest in blocking this particular website. So they blocked access to the whole server. From 2007 to 2009, AT&T forced Apple to block Skype and other VoIP phone services on the iPhone. So again, AT&T being a phone company, they obviously have an interest in people not using voice over IP. And the Google Voice app received similar treatment when it came on the scene in 2009. In 2010, Windstream Communications hijacked users' search queries made using the Google toolbar within Firefox. And so they hijacked search terms that were punched into this toolbar and redirected the users to Windstream's own search portal and results. This was a DSL provider with more than 1 million customers at the time. In a similar vein, in 2011, it was discovered that several smaller IPs were redirecting search queries via a vendor called Paxfire. So what would happen is they were scanning search queries to look for specific trademarked, like company names. This vendor would then redirect the traffic directly to that company's website rather than to the search results page and collect a referral fee for that.
It's so nuts.
Absolute manipulation of internet traffic. And the thing is, it's not like this is some sort of opt-in service. They just put this in place. And this was a whole bunch of different ISPs that were involved in this. So they were subscribing to this service provided by Paxfire. From 2011 to 2013, AT&T, Sprint, and Verizon blocked Google Wallet, a mobile payment system that competed with a similar service which all three companies had a stake in developing. Moving to Europe now, in 2012, a report from the body of European regulators for electronic communications found that violations of net neutrality affected at least 1 in 5 users in Europe. The report found that blocked or slowed connections to services like VoIP, peer-to-peer technologies, gaming applications, and email were commonplace. That's kind of scary. In 2012, the FCC caught Verizon Wireless blocking people from using tethering applications on their phones. So that's where you can set your phone up to be a Wi-Fi hotspot using your data connection, and then you connect your wireless laptop to your phone and use that connection kind of thing. So they were blocking access to these apps that would do this tethering thing because they allowed users to circumvent Verizon's $20 tethering fee.
For crying out loud.
Yeah, I know, hey? AT&T. So in 2012, AT&T announced that it would disable the FaceTime video calling app on customers' iPhones unless they subscribed to a more expensive text and voice plan. AT&T had one goal in mind, separating customers from more of their money by blocking alternatives to AT&T's own products. And then Verizon again, and I think this is the most telling one and the most important one. During oral arguments in Verizon versus the FCC in 2013, judges asked whether the phone giant would favor some preferred services, content, or sites over others if the court overruled the agency's existing open internet rules. Verizon counselor Helgi Walker had this to say: "I'm authorized to state from my client today that but for these rules, we would be exploring those types of arrangements." And she apparently repeated this statement at least 5 separate occasions during the oral arguments. So, what can we take from that?
Give an inch, they'll take a mile.
If net neutrality is repealed, these companies are going to start favoring some internet traffic over others. This Verizon rep basically admitted that outright, that the only reason they're not doing that now is because these rules are in place. And now we're talking about getting rid of them?
Hold on. The FCC's current chairman is Ajit Pai, or Pai. I'm not sure how to say that. He was a Verizon lawyer. Worked for the company trying to circumvent net neutrality laws. He gets to be chairman, and suddenly he's pushing to have net neutrality completely rolled back. Not only rolled back, in some cases completely obliterated.
That's kind of a scary connection.
Well, that's the thing. He's literally trying to do things that would set the internet back in really bad ways and allow for big mega corporations to take presumptive control over the entire industry. Mm-hmm. And these are the only companies where, it's kind of like them and gas companies. They don't really compete. It's like, hey, one day, this is their price. And then the next day it's, 10% more. And everybody's suddenly 10% more. And they're all sitting there going, oh, yeah, we're competing. See, we were going to go to 20 cents, but no, 10 cents is fine. You were going to go to 20 cents. Well, yeah, that's tomorrow.
That's the thing. If all the companies, I mean, there's arguments that say, yes, net neutrality is important, but we should let the free market decide that, and so the companies that respect net neutrality will get more business. Okay, but there's a few counterpoints to that. For one thing, you're often locked into contracts with these companies, at least in some places. So if they change the rules, you're gonna pay a big cancellation fee to go move over to somebody else. Also, you're talking about really, really big companies where there's not necessarily a lot of competition.
Yes.
And if they're all doing it in one way or another, which they probably all will be, and we won't know about it. That's the other thing, is if they are engaging in this kind of stuff, how would we know about it? Because they could do it in secret or subtle ways. I think one of the most devious and subtle ways that they could do this is simply by throttling traffic to certain websites. This could have a major impact on where internet traffic goes. There's been studies done that show that websites that even take 1 second longer to load lose like 10% of their traffic. People just go back and find a different site. So if ISPs start throttling down, the packets going to and from this website, which would be completely illegal, they could really damage a brand's business. And then what they could do is start taking money from certain companies to give preferential treatment to their websites and throttle all their competitors. So Walmart could strike up a deal with Verizon and say, we're going to pay you to give preferential treatment to our packets, and you guys just, throttle down the traffic to Target's website over there. What'll end up happening is people going to Target's website will have a frustrating experience. A lot of them are going to just back out of it and go somewhere else. And if Walmart's the only website that's working well, what do you think is going to happen? This is completely hypothetical, by the way. I'm not saying this is happening or has happened. I'm just saying it could happen. And it will happen. Let's just, it will happen. If this stuff becomes legal, then there's just literally nothing you can do about it. This will directly impact gamers as well, especially online gamers. Imagine if you had to pay an additional fee to use your internet connection for gaming. Sort of like how you have to pay an additional fee for the sports package if you're on cable or whatever. Imagine having to pay that additional fee in order to use your internet service for gaming. That could very well be a thing, and probably would. I mean, any way that people can find, that these companies can find to make additional money, they will. Or imagine, getting your gaming connection throttled down because you aren't subscribing to a higher tier of internet access, and so, you've got tons and tons of lag. Imagine telecom and ISP companies cutting backroom deals with gaming developers to favor certain games over others. Like, all of this could very well become a reality, a very legal reality.
We've seen what these companies do when they are given, and this is the thing. This is the thing that people need to understand. A lot of people say this is less regulation. This is not the same kind of regulation. This is not the kind of rules that prevent growth. These are the kinds of rules that say that everybody's equal and freedom is the paramount. That's what's important.
We're talking about basic human rights. People have the right to be alive, and so if the building or you're building for them has a high chance of killing them, well, no, you should not be conducting business in the civilized world. There's minimum standards that we hold people to, that we expect our government to hold people to. On the internet, you're not talking about like people dying because of internet throttling, but what impact is this going to have on the freedom of speech and expression? What impact is it going to have on, they think fake news is a problem now. What if some politician buys out an ISP or, slips some money to an ISP under the table and says, hey, do you want to just redirect 500,000 of your customers to this article bad-mouthing my political opponent? That would be completely legal. Completely legal. May sound like a bit of an over-the-top example, but that...
It sounds over the top, but just from the things that we listed that have actually happened, that's not even that far off the chart.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
just look at what they've done to PewDiePie and what they've tried to do to advertising. Like, as YouTubers, we're obviously a little sensitive to this, but it's we see what they want to do, and we're asking people. Again, it's not about kicking up bad regulations. It's about maintaining freedom for everything, equality for everything. And when it comes to when that everything is information, when that everything is your ability to go to any website that you want to, whether it's My Little Pony or whether it's a science page on Wiki for, helping somebody do a science project, all of that information should be quick and easy. There shouldn't be a lineup for certain people for certain things just because they didn't pay enough, or just because content creators didn't pay enough for you to be able to see it all the time. That's bad. That is very, very, very bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've hammered that point home. The examples that I listed off are from an article from freepress.net. I'll put a link down in the description, and it has links to all of the original news articles on these incidents, so you can take a look at those. There's also a petition going around, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
What's the best place for people to go to get more information on this and to take some action, maybe, if they feel compelled to?
So you have until July 18th to make your voice heard. A bunch of people have made a website called battleforthenet.com. It's www.battleforthenet.com. And you can fill out a thing. If you live in the States, you can fill out a thing and send it in, and that goes to the FCC, and you can also send it to your representatives and get them to realize that this is an important subject, and get them to realize that this has to be done, and it has to be done right, and it has to be done properly. You can't just kind of shoehorn this in. It has to be done in an acceptable way.
Right. Okay, so I know we spent a lot of time on that, but it was very important. We're going to get into gaming news stuff right away here. But first, our sponsor for today's episode, MMOGamerStore.com. Your source for alpha, beta, and early access keys that are hard to get a hold of.
It really takes the hassle out of trying to get beta codes.
It's got keys for a whole bunch of games all in one place. You just go to MMOGamerStore.com, search for the game you're looking for, and it shows you the price. There's discounts and sales going on. They host auctions every now and then. Definitely check them out. MMOGamerStore.com. Please support our sponsors. They help us a lot. So,
all right, let's hammer this quickly. So Steam ended up banning a gigantic number of players. Funny enough, after their summer sale. So after the summer sale, where games were really cheap, a lot of cheaters and exploit people bought a metric ton of games and then discovered the next couple of days that they got banned. And apparently this ban list had been sitting around for a while and it just didn't get activated. So some people are calling foul on Steam for taking advantage of players with bad, gaming habits and ethics, I guess you could say. So yeah, a lot of people really upset about it. But the people who are upset about it are people who cheat in multiplayer games. So I don't really have that much sympathy for them. Speaking of multiplayer, League of Legends is going through a lawsuit for a rip-off game or a knockoff game, whatever you want to call these. This knockoff game, I've seen this thing. I think I had it installed on my phone, and I was just like, how can they make this thing? This is a blatant rip-off of every single hero in League of Legends. This is absolutely ridiculous. Lo and behold, they did sue them, or Riot is suing them. They responded with, "How dare you claim that our game is a knockoff? Our game is an absolute wonder to play, and we are in no way, shape, or form ripping off of anything. And how dare you say that? And if you say that, we will sue you." So yeah, this is going to be fun to watch over the next year or two. PS4 and PayPal accidentally banned a couple thousand people, and those people could not access their video games at all in any digital game that they had bought digitally. not available to them to play.
Wait,
Now,
they accidentally banned these people?
yes, they accidentally. So it wasn't a user's fault. They weren't, doing things that were abnormal. It was basically, from what we heard, PayPal triggered accidentally a report that said that these accounts were, had done something illegal, and so PlayStation just automatically banned them. Like, just their computers said, "Oh, looks like this player account was using like stolen credit cards or something," and shut them down.
Huh.
They're trying to reverse it, but while they're going through the list reversing it, these people who have PlayStations and who have their games on there, if they're digital, they can't play them. They can't even touch them.
So their accounts got banned, and because of the DRM that's in place, they can't even play their single-player games or anything like that.
Yeah.
This idea of having to be online, is having to have a persistent internet connection in order to play a single-player game, or a game that shouldn't otherwise require an internet connection, but they arbitrarily require it for DRM purposes, I think is utterly absurd.
Speaking of money issues, Ark Survivor Evolved has been officially released, and the price tag almost doubled. Like, in some cases, it's like it doubled its cost, and so a lot of people were annoyed with that.
Well, yeah, just slightly.
Crash Bandicoot tearing it up in the charts. Oh my goodness! Apparently, huge success. So that was surprising. I thought it would do good, but apparently it's doing really, really, really good. So that's good, I guess. There were some other relaunches in the past that just went over really, really badly. So I think a lot of people weren't expecting it to do good at all. And yeah, it's blown right through the park. So that's a good thing. That's more or less a good thing.
And speaking of older games, for anyone who thinks that Valve does not care about the Half-Life series anymore, the original Half-Life game got a patch this week, fixing some issues that were in place. So somebody over there is still keeping an eye on it. So
you know that friend who called me last week and was all in a tiff about Half-Life 3 being confirmed? Well, got another text from him today. It said, "Hey, Half-Life just got an update. I told you, mother." And then that was it. I think he hit send before he found out that it was just an update for the original Half-Life.
Oh my goodness. If you want to hear our discussion on why there's probably not going to be a Half-Life 3, or at very least not for a long time, have a listen to last week's podcast. We go into that. We also talk about Star Wars and lots of other fun stuff. So, yeah.
Then what else we got? We got this is a couple days old. We're probably going to be getting a PlayStation 5 in 2019. That was kind of that's a pretty good guess, because they're not making something that's comparable to the Scorpio. So them making a new console makes sense. Although a lot of people were guessing that this would have been the last physical console, but something that the PC culture has shown is that people want a physical product in their house. They don't want to rely on streaming their video games from basically like a Roku or a cable box. They're just not interested in that. Yeah, so I guess physical consoles are going to be around for at least another generation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and ZeniMax Media, which is the parent company of Bethesda, is being sued by Dion DiMucci, the singer for the 1960s hit The Wanderer, which, as many of you probably know, was heavily featured in promo material for Fallout 4. And anyway, now he's suing them for the use of that song.
I guess he 2 years later, got around to actually watching the trailer that his music video that his song was in.
Well, this is a guy who was famous in the 60s, so probably not much of a gamer. Just gonna go out on a limb and say that. He's doing this on moral grounds. I mean, I imagine he's probably doing fine financially, but he's seeking $1 million. He's seeking $1 million in damages, which I don't know.
They can afford it.
I find it funny that he's arguing he finds the use of this song morally repugnant, paired with Fallout 4 imagery, when the song itself is about a guy who's an absolute womanizing douchebag.
Yeah,
who
that too.
basically wants to. He basically wants to sleep with a different woman every night, and the moment he finds he has feelings for one of them, he moves on. It's kind of like Chuck Norris when he was in the Expendables 2. He only agreed to be part of it if they removed the swearing.
It's like, really?
It's totally fine to, blast people in the face with a machine gun and with exploding body parts.
You can rip their spine out of their body, but don't you dare
don't you dare cuss in front of me. So that's about all that we have for this week. I know it's been a packed show. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for staying to the end. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, MMOGamerStore.com. On behalf of Subsidian, my name is Ashen Entity. We will talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to Augmented Reality, presented by the SSS League. If you appreciate this weekly content, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Patrons get exclusive access to podcast outtake videos, downloadable music, an RSS feed of our podcast, and more. See patreon.com/the SSS League for details. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.